One of the stories that we saw this weekend about the government shutdown that really concerned us was the story about the potential churches being shut down and Catholic priests not being allowed to say Mass on military bases. And we wanted to get to the bottom of it. So to that end, joining us now, John Schlageter. He is the General Counsel for the Archdiocese for the Military Services. Mr. Schlageter, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So we saw these stories. We saw the op-ed that you wrote about this, and tell me this isn't true. The government, because of the shutdown, is keeping priests from saying Mass on bases?
Well, it's not quite that inflammatory. The government is not keeping priests from celebrating Mass purely as an attack on Catholics. There's a well-known shortage of Catholic priests in this country, and because of that, there's also a very well-known shortage of priests who are available to serve as military chaplains. These priests are younger men who are commissioned officers of the United States government, and it's very tough to convince a bishop that he should take one of his young priests and release him to serve as a military chaplain. So I believe right now there are only about 235 active duty priests who are serving as chaplains. But in order to ensure that Catholics in the military are receiving the sacraments as part of their First Amendment rights to the free exercise of their faith, the government has created GS and contract positions, basically religious ministry positions, for priests to either supplement the work of an active duty chaplain or to provide as an on-site priest on a military installation. And so those are the priests we're talking about. We're not talking about active duty priests. We're talking about these priests who are either GS or have a government contract, and the contract isn't currently funded.
Okay, but I'm Catholic, and I know priests
Sure.
pretty well, and they're not going to celebrate Mass for pay from the government. I'm sure that if they know people are looking to celebrate Mass and have communion, and they've got Catholics that they need to take care of, they're just going to come in and volunteer and celebrate Mass. There's nothing wrong with that, right?
Well, there is nothing wrong with that, except that in order to get onto a military base, you have to pass through the gate of security. And also there's a law on the books called the Anti-Deficiency Act that provides that during a government shutdown, you cannot volunteer services that would otherwise be provided by a government contractor or GS position.
Oh.
So that's why these priests can't work. It's not because we're targeting Catholics. It's because they are GS positions, for better or for worse, and no person can volunteer for those types of positions.
All right, well, surely someone's going to make an exception here. So you're telling me this last Sunday, these priests were willing to volunteer and celebrate Mass for men and women in uniform, and they were not allowed to because of this rule?
They were not allowed to because of the shutdown. In some places, the contracts the priests have allowed them to work. In other places, the priest was deemed by the command to be essential personnel and able to work. But in many places throughout the country and across the world where priests have these positions, they were not allowed to work.
Now, we were told, I don't know about Quantico, which is in our listener area, but we were told by a caller on the show yesterday that at Fort Belvoir they were not allowed on, and in fact the church itself was closed so that people couldn't worship independently. Have you heard about any of this?
Well, I know that at Fort Belvoir there's an active duty priest, and so he was able to celebrate some of the Masses, but I believe that 3 of their Sunday Masses were canceled, and from what I've been told, those were provided by contract priests, and one of them happened to be the Spanish Mass. So at Fort Belvoir, they had to cancel a few Masses. Another place in the local region was actually the United States Navy Yard.
Oh, sure.
Which we are all very familiar with. The Navy Yard has an active duty Catholic priest, but the Navy Yard has a very small chapel and sort of a smaller Catholic population during the weekend. Joint Base Anacostia Bowling has a very large chapel and a large Catholic population that lives on base, and their priest there is the GS priest, not an active duty military chaplain. So the priest who's active duty at the Navy Yard canceled Masses at the Navy Yard and told his congregation that they were moving to Anacostia Bowling, where everyone could join and pray, rather than in the very small chapel that is at the Navy Yard. So there are good stories coming out of this. There was a priest in Virginia who was not allowed on base down in Virginia Beach. He wrote an email to his parishioners and said, "I have to celebrate Mass on Sunday. So I'm going to celebrate a private mass in a park off base. And I've been told that he had over 100 people attend that meeting.
Wow. Listen, yes, these are great stories, but they shouldn't have to happen. I'm astounded to hear this. John Schlageter is our guest, General Counsel for the Archdiocese for the Military Services. You're an attorney as well, obviously. Isn't there a freedom of religion issue here and the right to celebrate and worship that can be activated and pushed forward?
Well, there is a freedom of religion issue. As you know, we all have that First Amendment right to the free expression of our religion, but because military personnel are considered a captive audience, case law has made very clear that the government has to provide for that faith. If you're on a base and there's a Catholic church a block away and you can walk to it, then you have access to that. But if you're on a base and you're a young enlisted man and you're not allowed off base on the weekends, you have to miss mass if there's no priest.
Wow. So what can be done here? I mean, I can feel people's pulses boiling right now as they listen to this. They want to do something. Who should they call? Who should they write a letter to? How can we move this along?
Well, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but on Saturday, I guess my op-ed brought up a little attention. It was brought. This whole matter was brought to the floor of the United States House of Representatives, and a resolution was passed 400 to 1. I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt to that one person and just assume that he pressed the wrong button, urging that the Secretary of Defense put these positions back into these Catholic priests back into ministry. That resolution has not gone to the Senate, but I hear that people on Capitol Hill are working very diligently to make sure that all priests are declared as essential personnel and are able to work under the shutdown. All
right, so we'll keep an eye on it. We'll make sure that Harry Reid somehow brings it to the floor, and then I can't imagine President Obama not signing that. I understand that they're trying not to. They say they're trying not to do this piecemeal, but come on, this is something that should be done. All right, John Schlageter, General Counsel for the Archdiocese for the Military Services in America. Thank you so much for giving all this information to us. And your op-ed definitely caught a little attention. Are you okay with that? Is the Archbishop okay with you making so much noise?
Yes. The op-ed wasn't. Some people have said that the op-ed has created sensationalism. I wrote that op-ed. It's only 4 paragraphs, just to inform the population of a problem that no one ever contemplated prior to the shutdown. In 1995, when they had the last shutdown, we didn't have this shortage of Catholic priests, so there were very few contracted GS positions. But the fact that so many people were not being ministered to this weekend, I thought I had to say something, and I put out the facts. And that's about it. This isn't the administration out to get Catholics. This isn't somebody with a vendetta against Catholics. This is just a residual effect of the positions that were created to accommodate Catholics that no one ever contemplated would not be able to work in a government shutdown.
And the non-Catholics in our audience need to understand that as a Catholic, celebrating Mass on a weekly basis is an obligation. It's not something that we just do when it's convenient. I'm guessing the Archbishop, though, has let the Catholics on bases know that if it wasn't available to them, they're absolved of any sin on this, right?
Yes, I'm not a theologian, but I do know that we cannot require the impossible of Catholics. So if you're a Catholic and you couldn't make it to Mass because of this, you are dispensed.
I'll tell you, sometimes it feels like it's the impossible, but I'll let that alone. John Schlageter, General Counsel for the Archdiocese of Military Services, thanks so much for joining us this morning.